Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. Before we kick off this week's episode, just a quick ask. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to make sure that you never miss an episode, never miss out on any of the strategies and tactics that we're sharing to help you continue charting your own path to freedom. And if you'd like to go deeper with any of this, we've launched a free Facebook group, which you can join at pathtofreedom.com/group. And we've linked that in the show notes to make it easy for you to find. All right. Thank you again for being here. Let's drop in to the episode. Hey, what's up, everyone? And welcome back to the Path to Freedom podcast. Today, I'm joined by Chad, Tracy, and Josh Markland. I almost said McFarland. So that's, you see me glance up to make sure I got that right. Josh Markland and Chad and Josh are the co-founders of Second Family, new up-and-coming franchise company that I was introduced to recently. And I'm thrilled to have you guys here on the Path to Freedom podcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Wes. Great to be here.
Yeah, and you have to go back and tell everyone that your new nickname is McFarland, which is at least probably better than like McLovin or something like that.
Better than a lot that I've gotten before, yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, I was excited when I got introduced to this concept, and especially once I started to understand how you guys are doing things a little bit differently in your space. So maybe start out, one of you or both of you, just kind of give us a quick overview. What is Second Family? What do you guys do? Who do you help, and how do you do it?
Yeah, I guess I'll get started, Wes. Thanks so much for the introduction. Second Family is a senior home care company specializing in private duty care, which would be, non-medical services. It was born out of an experience Josh and I, who are actually cousins, had with our grandmother. Our grandmother, Deanie, she had Alzheimer's for almost 12 years. Quick version of our story is my mom had her in a dementia facility that was super expensive. It was also, extremely poor quality of care that she got. My mom ended up bringing her back home. We set her up in my mom's cottage, which is a little apartment above her garage. And she proceeded to hire human beings, we'll call them, out of the newspaper. These were people that typically didn't have any experience or anything. And that was okay at first, but then over time, she required 24/7 care the last couple of years of her life. If anyone out there knows about Alzheimer's disease, a lot of times it can be a very slow decline over a long period of time. And that's kind of what she experienced. And these caregivers eventually were coming 24 hours a day, but that meant there was a lot of drama associated with caregivers not showing up, or they, we'd call, where are you? And no answer. And this one, just broke up with their boyfriend. And so they're crying. And so it was a lot of burden on my mom that fell on top of her when that occurred. So that was the genesis that kind of got the wheels turning on how we were going to kind of get started, wanted to do things differently. We understood the problems in our industry, right? And I'll also say I was a business owner in the financial sector, was really looking for something more meaningful in my career. And this was it, creating a family story, a company based on a family story. And we always talk about, taking a negative and turning it into a positive. So a horrible disease, turning it into a family business that our grandmother would have been super proud of. So at some point, after that, I looped in Josh, my cousin, and I guess I'll throw it back to him, let him talk more about his side of the story.
Yeah, just super quick. Chad and I were cousins, but we're a few years apart, so we never really knew each other that well growing up, and certainly didn't have any kind of working relationship or anything. But I had just come back from overseas. I was doing some missionary work for about a year and a half, and was in between. I wasn't sure what my next step was going to be. At that point, I knew I'd like to start a business. I wanted to do something that was more meaningful than the cubicle jobs I had in the past where I hated life.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Chad reached out at an opportune time. I think it was a little bit of divine intervention that took place there. And I originally agreed to come up to Maryland. I was in Virginia, but I agreed to come up to Maryland and help him get licensed and try to get the business off the ground. Wasn't really sure if I could commit to anything beyond that. And when I got here and he and I started to get to know each other a little better beyond just Christmas and Thanksgiving, it was real clear that we had complementary skill set. I knew that I was bringing something to the table that Chad didn't have and was going to need in order to make Second Family successful. And I also realized that having worked with him, that if I was ever going to start a business, he had a lot of what I didn't have that was going to be needed as well. And so it was a really good match right from the get-go. And so one thing led to another, and I stuck around, and we've been doing this for 12 years now, and have really enjoyed growing the business and seeing so many families get the help that our family just didn't get back then.
Yeah, well, it's a cool story, and thank you guys for sharing that. I mean, I think, so many of the great businesses out there started, from someone solving a problem that they were personally experiencing or someone close to them was experiencing. And, I think that's important, for folks to understand. Chad, I got to ask, Josh is your younger cousin. You didn't know him that well. Like, why did you reach out to him? What was the genesis of that if you guys weren't all that, close necessarily growing up?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm surprised Josh didn't mention he's 10 full years younger than me. I would say 10 years less mature, but
I think he said a little age gap. Yeah, I don't think he even specified younger. So
that's true. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I guess, when I'm 23 and he's 13, I've got other things going on than what he does,
For sure.
So I'll echo Josh's sentiment that it was divine intervention. I didn't know him like that. I didn't. All I knew was I was extremely busy with my other business. I had this idea, had done a lot of research on it. I just didn't have time to implement it. If you know anything about our industry, there's a licensing process that goes on, which can be pretty intense. And by the way, we have a great solution for our franchisees for that, but that might come later. But I mean, I needed help getting licensed. That's simple. And so I convinced him to come help me do that. I realized he had the skills to help us get licensed, and that, was complementary to his actual skills, right? Which is like being more administrative. He enjoys solving problems, using technology, and those are things I'm terrible at, right? I have a sales and marketing background, and that's what I knew I could do. So basically, as we got licensed, we realized, hey, this is a good match. We worked out a deal. He moved to Maryland, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's cool. I was just curious because I guess I kind of assumed, I knew you guys were cousins. I just assumed that you did spend a lot of time growing up, and it was just kind of a natural thing. But the complementary skill set's important, right? In any sort of a partnership, and it does sound like the two of you have very very different skill sets that do complement each other nicely and round things out, for the leadership team that you've got. Yeah, it kind of made me think. I have a younger cousin that I think he's 6 or 7 years younger than me, and growing up, again, that age gap was kind of there, so we weren't super close, but we'd play football in the backyard every now and then, and I might rough him up a little bit, remind him who the bigger, older, stronger cousin is. He's a Navy SEAL now, so I leave that alone. I know my place. He turned the tables on me, so got to be careful with those younger cousins when you're growing up. You don't know how things may be different down the road. But so you guys have been in business for 12 years, started it in Maryland, and you've just more recently started franchising the business, correct?
Correct. So our first franchisee opened in 2020. So started in Maryland in 2012. Kind of built things up, got a feel for what our processes were going to be. We did one of the two main complaints that we saw coming into this as outsiders was a lack of reliability and a lack of transparency. And so those are kind of the two main problems that we set out to solve as we got into this. It's funny to say it now, Wes, but 12 years ago, we'd go out and do an in-person assessment with a potential client, and maybe one of our competitors, I won't mention their name, but they had been there prior to us, and there was literally like the carbon copy, the 3-copy papers, that's what their agreements were, and they were like ripping off the yellow copy and leaving the white and the red. And so it's like, there's got to be a better way than this. We got to get some technology into the process.
Yeah.
So that created the first step in a long path of how can we bring more off-the-shelf software, not necessarily like try to be a software company, but how can we pull pieces that are out there readily available that people would be comfortable to use, not just the families comfortable, but our staff as well, that we can get implemented into the process here. And so that kind of got refined over a few years. We opened our first franchise location in 2020, right before COVID, which was ideal timing because that wasn't difficult at all.
Yeah. I started a business in March of 2022, so timed it beautifully. I can relate to trying to get something off the ground with the world closing down around you. So I want to get into more of the, I want to make sure the listeners understand kind of the services that you guys provide and also what you're not providing, right? Because when we talk about, in-home senior care, there's a lot of different types of care that someone could need. And it may not just be senior care either, right? So I want to make sure that the audience has a good understanding of what you guys really focus on. And then, any ways that you are maybe doing it differently than other companies that are out there offering kind of the same menu of services. But I want to highlight the technology piece that you mentioned because I think you're exactly right. I mean, in your business, I assume in most cases you have a end user client that are receiving the services for you, but in many cases you're probably dealing a lot with and communicating with someone that's not that end user client, right? You're dealing with a decision maker of some sort that may or may not be local. So, having good technology and good systems in place to be able to communicate with them, keep them up to speed, make sure that you are being fully transparent so that they know, kind of at all times what they're getting and that the services they expect are being delivered. So I think that's hugely important and something that any company in this day and age should be looking closely at because, as we all get, as consumers, as we all get more and more, reliant on nothing more than pressing a couple buttons on our phone to buy whatever products or services we're getting, like you really stand out as a company, probably in not a very positive way if, you have to, go through some of these annotated processes to buy or purchase a product or a service.
Yeah, I'll take that, Wes, and I guess I'll talk about exactly what it is that we do, maybe how we're delivering that care in our case differently, and then maybe Josh can touch on the technology that you mentioned. But yeah, we're a private duty home care company, and so the types of things we're doing would be considered non-medical. So physically assisting the patient with dressing, bathing, mobility assistance, toileting. But also, just being a companion. We can also provide transportation, do laundry, make meals, clean up around the house, just whatever they need. It's really what we're doing. So from that standpoint, we're all companies like us are licensed the same, right? We all have to get the same type of license. And but our care delivery is different, right? When Josh and I started, we set out, we had goals to be the Mercedes of home care. We really feel like we have accomplished that. And we had to decide how we were going to do that, right? So the difference that we have is we're going to have an RN care coordinator that really acts as a concierge, right? So we provide the same types of services that everyone else does, but we're actually going to have the family meet directly with an RN in every case. And some states do require that. Maybe an RN has to go every 90 days. Every 90 days they go out, they meet with the client, they do an assessment, they fill it out, and then they're done. 90 days later, they come back. With us, the family is going to have the RN care coordinator as their primary point of contact as they go through the care process. So our RNs are not getting paid per case, and that's it, or per time they do an assessment. They're getting paid throughout the process. But it's part of our margins, right? So we're paying the nurse to kind of do that assessment and then be available for that family as they go through their inevitable ups and downs over the course of time, right? It's not always a slow decline, right? People go up, down, right? We're going 20 hours a week to see grandma, and then on a day we're not there, or after we leave, she falls, she breaks her hip. Now everything's changed, right? She's in the hospital, she's in rehab, she comes home, she's got more needs. Now we have to go 12 hours a day. The RN's going to be with them through that whole process, right? Guiding them, coaching them, helping them. The other thing the RN's going to do is we're not just going to do the services we provide. That's what we do, but we're going to call in other people that are in the senior care world to help us in those instances when we need it. The RN's going to kind of take care of that. So an example might be they need some equipment in the home because they can no longer get out of bed on their own, right? We need a lift. Maybe at some point hospice needs to be called in. They don't do what we do, and we don't do what they do. Maybe we need some physical therapy in the home. That would be considered a medical service. So we're really relying on the RNs to kind of handle giving referrals out in the community. And then it comes full cycle, right? If we're out there giving referrals to people in the senior care world, it stands to reason that you're going to get those back in return down the road. So that's really a big part of what we're doing, is trying to, if it's not something we want to stay in our lane, do what we do perfectly, but also, offer those other services for things that we don't do. And so that's kind of going above and beyond. Families trust nurses. Like you said, we have clients' families in California, and when we're in Maryland, we've had them in Germany, across the pond and things like that. So, we really need to make sure that we're making that family feel comfortable that keeping mom at home all the way through until they pass is a viable option, because sometimes families are like, too much, going to assisted living, right? Even though they promised grandma that we're not going to do that, right? So that's really kind of how we're delivering the care differently. And perhaps, Josh, you could speak on some of the technology on how we do that.
Everyone, we'll get right back to the episode, but I wanted to quickly share a free resource with you. If you're curious about franchise ownership and want to learn more about how countless people, including myself, have leveraged franchising as a way to create more freedom for themselves and to take control of their livelihood, I've put together an ebook. It's called Franchise Wealth Creation, and it's the perfect starting point for anyone that's just curious to learn more about this whole franchise thing and how I've helped hundreds of other people navigate all the steps involved in understanding and researching franchising. So click the link in the show notes, fill out a short form. I'll send you the ebook. I think it's a great starting point if you're curious at all about learning more about franchising. All right, let's get back to the episode. Yeah, I want to get into the technology, but the RN component and that you guys are doing, it really is, because look, there's other franchises in this space, right? That to me is a very different component. And it sounds like the RN is really kind of quarterbacking, not only for you guys as the business owners or, for the franchisees, but also for, your clients and the client's family, right? And I can only imagine how frustrating it is for a lot of people out there paying for these types of services to not have like a dedicated point person that they can reach out to with questions and ask for advice and ask for guidance and get, good updates. Because it's I imagine not the same person going out to the home every single time, depending on the schedule, depending on the services that are needed. So to have that one kind of dedicated, almost account manager that is, then licensed and trained as an RN, giving them that added level of kind of expertise, that makes a really big difference. And then the referrals that you're able to do, because I imagine more times than not, your clients end up needing some of these other services that you may not necessarily provide, but if you can give a good recommendation for a company that you've vetted or you've worked with, and you can kind of confidently recommend to one of your clients, it's making your client's life and their family's life so much easier. And I know that's not something that most of the other companies in your space are doing.
Yeah, families are overwhelmed. I was in the office yesterday, and a lady came in off the street just looking for some information, and I sat down. We talked for half an hour. She just moved her mom. Her dad died in February. She just moved her mom here from Arizona. She was like overwhelmed. My mom's got dementia. She's got a little bit of aggression. I'm trying to work full time. She broke down in tears while we're sitting there on the couch together talking about her story. People are overwhelmed. So if we can take a little bit off of their plate, using the term quarterback is exactly what I was talking to her about yesterday. I said, we're going to kind of quarterback the process for you. She acknowledged that it's probably not going to improve from here. It's probably going to decline, and that's okay. But that's come to the reality of what we're dealing with. And so I was explaining to her that the RN concierge is going to walk through this process with you. She's going to be here not only to supervise the caregivers, not only to bring in other third parties that you might need, such as equipment, but to talk to you. She felt so much better when she left the office yesterday, just having talked it through with somebody who said, it's going to be okay. You're not the only one going through this. We can help you. I think that was a huge relief to her. And she thanked me on the way out. I said, I feel so much better having talked to you guys and met you. Thank you so much. I can't wait to get started. Like, it's a terribly impactful time. I just went through it with my mom. My other grandmother was living with my parents for a few months, and my mom aged terribly during that time. It was stressful on her. So to be able to take anything off of their plate that we can to improve the process is what we're here to do.
Yeah, I mean, for so many, if it's the grown kids of an aging parent that needs help, for a lot of people, it's the first time they're dealing with something like that, right? So I can imagine it's beyond refreshing to come and talk to someone like you or someone with your organization that you guys clearly have systems and processes and you're experts at this, right? And it's got to be just such a relief to be like, okay, I don't have to know it all or have it all figured out. Like there's this is what these guys do, and they're very well, equipped to handle it, and they've kind of seen it all before.
Because everyone comes into this with no idea what's available to them. I always say it's not like shopping for a car where you're excited and you know what features and model and all that you want.
Yeah.
This is like, I don't want to deal with it until I have to, and then it's a big emergency, and I'm overwhelmed, I'm scared, I have no idea what's available, and so it's very impactful.
Yeah, no doubt. So the way I got into franchising, I'll just tell you the story real quick, because you may appreciate it. I worked for a company called 101 Mobility that was started and is still headquartered in Wilmington, where I live. I'd met the founders, and I was only a few years out of college, and they'd started franchising like a year, maybe a year and a half before I met them and went to work there. And they do wheelchair lifts, stair lifts, platform lifts, any type of home accessibility equipment. So I imagine would be an example of like the type of company that you could partner with and refer in, if and when. And as I kind of worked at that company, I had the chance to work in some different roles as they started growing the franchisee footprint. They put me into a national account role, and the goal was to go try to find some national relationships that we could, use to funnel more business out to the franchisees. And so one of the first things we did, was go to some of the national franchise in-home care companies out there, medical and non-medical. Mm-hmm. And I mean, look, there's some pretty established brands in terms of how long they've been around, the number of franchisees that they have. None of them had any processes in place to essentially, help their franchisees develop these types of relationships. Like what we learned the hard way with that was, if it was going to happen, it had to happen at the local level, franchisee to franchisee. And these big companies, just wasn't part of their model to say, all right, let's have a system where we can vet other companies with, services that complement ours that we know our clients would likely also need, and roll that out throughout our system. So it's cool that you guys are doing that. And as you bring in more and more franchisees, I imagine that's a big part of what you're going to teach them to do themselves. And as you guys grow, you'll have the chance to develop some of those types of national relationships.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer on our side to be able to want to provide vetted, as you said, every location is going to have a need for equipment at some point in time. So
yeah,
the more that we can offer value, not just to our clients, but our franchisees as well, to be able to come to the table, here's some tools, here's some tips, how you can increase your margins and how you can grow your business. I don't know. It's kind of like the carbon copy paper. I think those systems maybe just got so big 20, 30 years ago, and they haven't really iterated much since then. And so
it gets harder to turn the ship, once it gets so big. You can't make some of these adjustments as easily anymore. So did you guys ever expand out of Maryland, over the 12 years, or I guess the 8 or so years before you had your first franchisee? Or talk to me a little bit about the process leading up to deciding, hey, we're onto something bigger than just us running this business in Maryland, and we should think about franchising it.
Yeah, I mean, our goal was always to become a national brand. I don't think either one of us think small, and we wanted to create the best possible system out there and expand nationally. And we didn't really have any ideas. Obviously, the two options were to expand under our own umbrella, right, and probably hire regional managers and all of that, or you could franchise, right? So we investigated both options, and at the end of the day, what we're really looking for, this might lead into kind of the ideal candidate, but we're looking for people that are going to be owner operators, people who are going to, really own the business, be the face of their local business. It's a very localized business. Some of the franchise prospects we get are used to, they're national sales account representatives. They're traveling all over the country, and this is not that. This is like in your own little bubble in your city, and you're getting to meet as many people in the local area that also work with seniors as you possibly can, and you have skin in the game, right? And so it was clear to us, and became a very clear and obvious choice, that we need to franchise to create people that have skin in the game, that can maintain the quality that we wanted to maintain in our home office in Maryland. So, we just operated our sole location in Central Maryland, although it is kind of a large area that we've expanded upon over the years. But yeah, we stayed in Maryland until we started franchising. So I guess that started in 2018, 2019. We hired iFranchise to kind of help us turn our business into a franchisor system. Mm-hmm. Worked with attorneys. Obviously, you realize, Wes, all the time and money and effort that goes into that. And at the same time, we pay our bills through our home care company in Maryland. So we had to keep that going. So it was a really big time, but over the course of the last few years, as Josh and I have transitioned to be franchisors, we've been able to hire some great people here in our local office in Maryland and promote them. We've got a general manager that's been with us 8 or 9 years, and we've got our director of nursing that's been with us over 10 years, and we've got a scheduling manager that's been with us over 7 or 8 years. So we rely on those people. So the point here is that a franchisee can do the same thing over time, right? They have to be hands-on, driving business, be the face of the business, and they'll probably always still be the face of the business. Yep. But they can hire people as they grow over the course of time to kind of make them a little more semi-absentee as time goes on, but not at first.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Look, I think there's been a lot of emphasis over the last, I don't know, probably started with COVID, right? Of everyone wanting a semi-absentee or semi-passive, or even you hear some people talking about passive franchise opportunities, and it's like, look, in theory, you can hire a manager to run any business, right? But there's a lot of variables involved, and one of the biggest variables is the owner that's hiring that manager. How good are they at, recruiting, training, mentoring, motivating, retaining a good person. And then, look, at the end of the day, when you own a business, the buck stops with you, right? So like you need to at the very least think through, like, what does plan B look like if I have this manager and then all of a sudden that manager is not there anymore for whatever reason? Like, do I have the bandwidth and the ability and the interest to step in and take over? But especially for the type of business that you're in, I would think you definitely want that, owner operator. And I assume what you mean by owner operators, you just want someone that this is their primary or their full-time focus, right? You're not necessarily looking for owner operators in the sense that, the owners are going in and acting as caregivers, but it's that community development, because this is 100% the type of business that, I'm sure there's things you guys can do from a marketing and advertising standpoint to get your name out there and, generate some interest for your franchisees, but it's community driven, right? It's getting out there and making a name for yourself in the community, becoming a trusted name in the community. And there's no shortage of good referral sources for this type of business, but those referral sources are not going to develop themselves. Someone's got to be, putting that work in and then nurturing those relationships over time.
Yeah, we typically say that there's kind of three main pillars to running a second family, one of which is the sales and marketing portion. And that's ideally what our ideal franchise buyer would be interested in. You're correct. We don't want them out helping grandma or fixing breakfast or anything. What you said is exactly on point. Be out in the community, go to the trade show, go to the networking event, spend time getting to know the other marketers in the senior care space. That's a lot of the way that we generate a lot of our relationships, is just getting to know the other salespeople, and some introductions kind of naturally flow from that. But yeah, somebody that's out in the community, building relationships, being the face of the brand at different opportunities, is the type of person that would be successful. Because you're absolutely right. As I said before, nobody's shopping for this like you do a car. And so when the time comes that you need it, like you need it now, you don't need it 2 weeks from now. And so the fastest way to get it is to ask the referral source at the hospital or the skilled nursing facility or wherever you might be, who can I call to help? And building those relationships is so important.
Yeah, you want recommendations for something like this. Like, you don't necessarily want the company that's got the smartest pay-per-click campaign, right? Like, you want the company that, like, other people are going to vouch for and be like, yeah, this is who you need to go and talk to. Like, these guys are the best at what they do. So that makes a ton of sense. And I'm sure a question that some folks listening have, does a franchise owner need a background in healthcare?
They don't. No. The primary type of I know we do personality tests quite a bit in franchising, and you have to have that compassion. A lot of our franchisees do have some sort of personal family story, and that's why they're interested in getting to this space. But you equally, maybe more so, need to be an achiever, right? Someone that's going to drive business. Somebody that's really motivated to help as many seniors out there as possible, a real go-getter. So most of the franchisees have some sort of sales or marketing background. They're comfortable with meeting new people, getting out there. They don't want to necessarily be stuck behind a desk all day long. We want them getting out. Someone who's comfortable with doing those things. The kind of person who organizes the birthday party for their friend group. We use these kind of examples. The rest of it is really simple. You're just meeting people in healthcare instead of people in IT or whatever else you did in the past. Having some sort of background, though, in healthcare can be beneficial. Some of our franchisees, might be a husband-wife team or the wife's a nurse. That can be great. But in Maryland, we never had any nurses. We never were in healthcare. We didn't understand how any of this worked. We taught ourselves. So
it probably helped you in some ways, right? Because you didn't just do it the way it's always been done, right? Like you were looking at it from a non-healthcare professional lens. You were looking at it more from the lens of like, this was a shitty experience that we just went through, and none of the companies we talked to really made it all that much easier. Like, how would we want this to be done differently if we had to go through it again? So I imagine that's helped you guys and steered you in the right direction a lot. So healthcare background, not necessary. Certainly, makes sense that it could be beneficial, right? Probably from a relationship standpoint, right? You might already have some relationships that could be beneficial as you're getting the business up and running. But you need someone that's willing to go out and get involved in the community and be the face of the business, and that doesn't want to sit behind a desk all day. While at the same time being compassionate, right? And understanding that, yeah, they're in business to make money, right? But it's a real, challenging time that these folks are going through. You talked a little bit about licensing and, this RN care coordinator. So what does the staff need to look like for a new franchisee as they're getting started? Is the RN a W-2 employee? I mean, there's different models out there, and senior care and in-home care. There's subcontracting. There's W-2. I guess hybrids of that. What type of staff does a franchisee need? And I know, Chad, you mentioned you guys are doing some things to help franchisees with the licensing component. So maybe if you could speak to that as well.
Okay, yeah, I'll start with the last point, and yeah, we're helping our franchisees with licensing through a vendor who's an attorney that specializes in a few things, but in home care specifically, every single state is different. The majority of states do require some sort of license, but
it'd be too easy if they all had the same requirements and the same process. That wouldn't be any fun.
Yeah,
that's just another puzzle that Josh gets to solve, right?
Exactly. But it's the fact is like in franchising, you need to kind of create that legal barrier, if you will, to protect both sides, really.
Yeah.
And so, we have a vendor that's going to walk them through the entire licensing process so that they get set up correctly, but not just getting licensed. They're also going to make sure that they have the correct policies and procedures in place, and that they're, when they're hiring nurses and caregivers, that they are, following the state laws as far as that goes in the industry. I mean, every state's different. Some states require you to have like paid sick leave, for example, and as franchisors, we want to pass that on to an attorney to make sure that we're not telling them the wrong thing, right? Like we're not honestly like experts in all 50 states' laws.
You can't be. Yeah. And sometimes it changes. Like it's not feasible or practical. Like you got to do your own due diligence. You guys can point them in the right direction and have some trusted resources that you can connect them with, but ultimately they've got to figure it out themselves.
Yeah. And it's a way for us to help them without saying, hey, we're not allowed to do that, you're on your own.
Right.
And also the attorney has a program we could stay with them, which we definitely recommend, because the states are changing the laws all the time. Things are becoming more employee friendly, we'll call it, in certain states, and I'm sure you're aware of that.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a smart thing to do, whether you're a franchisee, a franchisor, or you're starting your own business from scratch. It's just something you need to do to maintain it long term.
We'll get right back to the episode in just a minute, but if you've been considering business ownership, if you're already a business owner looking to expand and you're curious about franchising, I'd love to connect with you, answer any initial questions that you have, talk about a specific franchise, and detail the exact process that I use and have taken hundreds of people through to help them understand franchise ownership, find the right franchise for them, and conduct the necessary due diligence. Click the link in the show notes if you'd like to schedule a free, no obligation strategy call. I look forward to talking with you. And now back to the episode. To your experience so far, and from what you expect, the licensing component is not like an insurmountable challenge that someone without a background in healthcare that already has the licensing couldn't overcome. if they really wanted to get into the business. It's just a matter of really figuring out what their local laws and requirements are, and then working through a process to make sure that they can check all the boxes, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it.
I mean, obviously the franchisee's involved, but the attorney is literally going to walk them through the entire process, complete the application, submit it to the state, follow up with the state, the examiners, all the things that need to be done, which not only makes them compliant, but we're going to submit it the proper way the first time. So now we're going to get licensed quicker than maybe someone trying to do it on their own as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, because in some states it's not a quick process as it is, but if you screw it up a couple times, you're going to be waiting for a while. Cool. So then, what about from a staffing standpoint? What does a franchisee need their staff to look like to be able to start operating?
Yeah, so typically, I mean, obviously you got to get your caregivers, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But from a back office standpoint, there's kind of three pillars. One of them is the sales marketing person out in the community. The second is going to be the nurse, and the third is going to be your recruiter and scheduler. So as we talked about, ideally, the franchisee is the one that's out in the community building relationships. The nurse, we go about that a couple of different ways. Chad alluded to some of our franchise groups. The nurse was a wife or part of the team, and so they've got that built in, which is great. For those who don't, we typically go on a little bit of a hybrid role. So you can go one of two routes. You can hire a salary right out of the gate and have a full-time nurse working for you. It's pretty expensive and not really necessary for the first probably year, because it's a little bit of a slower ramp up in our industry. So a lot of times what we have recommended and what some of our franchisees have done is just find a nurse who, I'll give you a common scenario. It's maybe she used to work full time. Now she's staying at home with the kids, and she's got her nursing license and wants to still be involved and wants to use it, but can't commit to working 3 12-hour shifts on the floor at the hospital anymore, or doesn't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And so
my mother-in-law was a labor and delivery nurse for 20 years, and she just couldn't do it anymore.
Perfect,
the 12-hour shifts and the I won't tell you some of the things she said, why she couldn't do it anymore, but she's still licensed, would be happy with something like this where is not as labor intensive for her. It's not on her feet, 12-hour shifts, and probably not as much of the politics that you're going to have if you're working in a hospital or even a doctor's office type setting.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's more almost triage type stuff because it's done mostly over the phone, except for the assessments that are done in person. And so in that case, we work something out. Typically, it's on a per caseload level, so you get paid every 2 weeks based on the number of clients that you're working with, and some will be more intensive than others, but it kind of evens out over time.
Yeah.
So that's a very effective way to get off the ground if you don't have a nurse in your ownership group without having to spend a ton of money. And then the third role would be the recruiter scheduler person. And so this obviously is whoever you've got that's handling your influx of caregivers. And we've got a couple of ways that we're doing this. One of the most effective is we've got a partnership with a firm, US-based firm who sources talent overseas in the Philippines. And so it's a very cost-effective way to use a vendor to fill this role. And so they've got an exact profile of the type of person that we're looking for to be successful. We give them some of our tools online about where they can go to find the caregivers. And so those Filipino employees are out, making calls, sourcing the caregivers, conducting the interview, getting them on board, and then the franchise owner comes to orientation. When the employee has gotten enough candidates to come to orientation, the franchise owner comes and vets them, yes, no, hires them if they like, and moves on. And so that's been a really cost-effective way for our franchisees. Again, if you don't have somebody that's willing to do the recruiting portion of things, it's not a super high-level job. It's an important job, and it's a job that somebody needs to do from the get-go. You need someone 40 hours a week getting your caregivers to come in the door. I know we've talked a little in the past. We kind of take a staffing model approach there. So all of our caregivers are all W-2 employees. None of them are 1099. All of them are W-2, but they're flex time employees. So they're only getting paid when they work. So it's very common in the home care space or in the CNA caregiver world space to work at a bunch of different places. Maybe you work your main job at the assisted living, for example, but then you want to work additional hours in home care. That's our kind of our average employee would be somebody who's working full time at a facility somewhere, but she works anywhere from 12 to 25 hours a week with us to make some additional money on the side. So we're totally comfortable with that. It's our job to get as many good qualified caregivers as we can into our pool. Again, it doesn't cost us anything unless they work, but it allows us to be really responsive to our clients' needs when something comes up.
Well, also they're not relying on you to be their full-time
Correct.
income, right? Which when you're ramping up and you're new and you're trying to build up the client base to get to that point where you could support, full-time, because that's the challenge in so many businesses where, a lot of times you end up biting the bullet and paying someone, to work 40 hours a week, even if you only have 20 hours a week of work for them, because they're good, they're qualified, and they're not gonna, be able or willing to just work when you need them until you're busy enough to keep them busy all the time. So yeah, that's a good model, and I think a little bit unique to a lot of what I've seen out there. And what type of we don't have to get too into the weeds on staffing, but what type of requirements or background are you looking? Are there any specific requirements that your caregivers have? It sounds like a lot of your caregivers are already kind of in this space to some degree, but are there any specific requirements or certifications that these caregivers need to have? I know it's not medical, right? But are there, or does it vary from state to state? Are there some states where there are certifications they need to have?
Well, maybe not unsurprisingly, every state's different, of course. And so, it does vary state to state. It could be that you just maybe need some certifications like, through the Red Cross or something like that, all the way up to like maybe the higher level would be like CNAs, certified nursing assistants, that if they're required to go through a course and all of that. So, it really varies state to state. We can help the franchisees. We have like a national database of both licensed and unlicensed caregivers, which is really the starting point for how we're going to hire. And they can either, like Josh said, they can either hire these caregivers or vet these caregivers on their own, or we have another way that we can assist them to do that kind of at the corporate level. But yeah, we have a database, and just depending on the state and the state's requirements, we'll kind of decide which one works best for them.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back to the episode, but one quick note, success doesn't happen in a vacuum. So if you'd like to learn more, you want to go deeper and interact with like-minded people, I'd love to have you join the free Path to Freedom Facebook group. You can join by going to pathtofreedom.com/group and become a part of the Path to Freedom community. All right, back to the episode. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm one last question for you guys, and then I want to make sure that you can kind of close this out with anything that you want to make sure that you share with the audience that maybe we didn't touch on yet. But last question, because I know this comes up all the time with these types of businesses. Who's paying for it? Is insurance paying for it? Is the family paying for it? Does it depend? Is it a combination? If there is an insurance component, what does that look like for a franchisee when it comes to collecting the money? Because that there can be challenges with that. So I know that's probably something that some of the audience is wondering about.
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, it's what a lot of our home care leads aren't really sure who pays for what and how much it costs and all that as well. So question. The vast majority of, well, I'll start by saying, again, the payer mix is going to vary from state to state based on what state offerings are available. In general, most people pay for our services privately. That's kind of been historically the way that this has gone, is that the non-medical stuff was paid privately. The medical stuff, when you needed doctor's orders and that kind of thing, was paid by Medicare. Increasingly, there's more money that is flowing into some third-party payer options. I would say still our vast majority of our clients still pay privately. The VA has a program for home care that has been increasingly friendly for our margins to be able to provide care for that. And in some areas of the country, it's like the VA is paying twice as much as what the going home care rate is. So that's been really lucrative in some spots. State to state, Medicaid is handled at the state level, and so state to state that changes. But there's some states in our country that have a really good Medicaid program, and so that's a viable option for candidates as well. But I would plan on most of the care being paid privately. And again, that's not because we don't accept insurance. It's just that, private health insurance doesn't pay for these kinds of services.
Right. That makes sense. And I would imagine in the eyes of a lot of, prospective franchisees, not the worst thing in the world that they don't have to, hire a full-time person to chase down insurance money and Medicare money that they're not even entirely sure how much they might actually get paid or when they'll get paid on it. Yeah. And I do believe the VA, pays and pays well for these services. When I was at 101 Mobility, they had an FSS contract with the VA. They could bring other franchisees onto that contract, and they bought a ton of that equipment for veterans that needed it, as they should, but they didn't really seem to expect like massive discounts. They just wanted good, reliable service and high quality, products. So
yeah, the VA does pay really timely. We get paid from the VA every 30 days like clockwork, so we never have a VA balance there at all. Medicaid, again, state to state, that can vary a little bit. There's typically a longer lag there from when you fill out the services to when you get paid. But the VA is very routine in how they pay. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, you guys have built a really cool business in a space where there's a ton of demand. There's in my opinion, a shortage of good, reliable companies out there doing it, and you're doing it differently, right? And I love the fact that you guys are not, healthcare guys that just decided to start another home care business. It came from a personal experience that you had. You saw, gaps in the process that, you guys experienced yourself, and you decided to solve a problem that you knew a lot of other people were having. And it seems like you're in a great position to keep this thing growing, and it'll be a nationally recognized brand in no time. What did I not ask you about that you wish I would have? What would you like to share with the audience as we wrap this one up?
Yeah, Wes, thanks for having us once again today. I'll just add that I feel like I know you have a lot of prospective franchisees on these podcasts, and I feel like we're in a sweet spot here. We have 4 open franchise locations that are all doing really well, profitable. Your candidates perhaps we'll see our item 19, which is the financial numbers, but without getting into that, everyone is profitable and increasing, and they've really done well. And we also have a lot of open territories available. Like if somebody's interested in Phoenix, Arizona, they're going to be able to get the first crack, first choice of whatever territory looks the best for them. I'll add, as far as third-party payer options, we're going to be able to kind of walk that franchise candidate through the process of, hey, what opportunities are available in your specific area? How much is the VA paying, reimbursing on, in your area? It's because it varies. I mean, 30 an hour to $75 an hour. It's a vast different. And like Josh said, other states Medicaid might be a better option. So we'll walk them through that process, through discovery, and we'll see if it makes sense for both sides.
Yeah. Well, it's a great point, right? That look, the demographics are, we all know the amount of people that are aging. People are living longer. There's a shortage of, call it senior housing. There's probably a better term for it than that, but there's a shortage of it, and most people would prefer to stay home if they could and could do it safely anyways, if they had the option. And so, it's not like there's not enough of the pie to go around in a business like this. If you're looking at franchises, again, there's some big established brands out there. Many of them are probably a bit set in their ways and haven't done a whole lot of evolving over the last decade or two. But all the prime territory is gone anyway, so it doesn't really matter, right? You're probably not getting into some of those franchises. So yeah, it's a very unique opportunity for a number of different reasons, and I love the way you guys have kind of built it, and I think it's in a really good spot, and it's gonna be fun to watch you guys grow. Where should people go if they want to connect with either of you, learn more about Second Family, if they're interested from a business ownership standpoint, or maybe they want to see if there's a location in their area because they have a need for the services themselves or for a family member?
Yeah, so our corporate site is secondfamily.com, 2ndfamily.com. And then we've got a bunch of information on franchising at secondfamilyfranchising.com. So I will also add one last thing, Wes. And again, thank you so much for the time today. There's tends to be at times a perception in the community that there's a caregiver shortage out there. And I just want to reassure everyone that there's not a caregiver shortage out there. And I could talk all day about that, but our process has been proven over 12 years now that we're able to find and identify caregivers, bring them into our system, and put them to work without any trouble. And so just to anyone out there who's heard about the senior care space, you're interested, but you're concerned about the caregivers and finding enough caregivers, it's honestly not a problem. We'd love to talk to you more about how we do that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, look, my guess is there's not a caregiver shortage. There's a shortage of companies that provide an opportunity that's enticing enough for caregivers to keep coming back. So, I think any business, the hardest part is finding and keeping good people, right? And you take good care of your people, maybe pay them a little bit more, usually doesn't even take a lot, but maybe a little bit more than what some of the other companies in your space are paying. Treat them like human beings, make them feel like they're part of a team, and, give them a little bit of autonomy, right? Then, it's not nearly as difficult to find and keep good people as you would hear others in whatever industry you're in.
Absolutely.
Talk about it. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good point. And we'll put those links for your websites in the show notes. But Chad, Josh, thank you guys